Oh, you don't like Would You Rather?
No, not really.
Okay.
Like, well, I don't know. It depends.
Okay, well, all right.
There's a lot of context we have to sort out first.
Sure. Oh, well, I was just going to go into playing it with you then, but you literally just said that's not what you like. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Ellie.
Hey, it's the Showstopper Podcast, our monthly chat to people from the world of musical theatre, improv and comedy.
Yes, it is. Good to be back.
Well, it's been a month.
It has been an entire month. We've started off our tour.
Yes, it's so exciting. The spring dates have kicked off, all listed on our website. Shameless plug.
Contractual obligations done.
That's how we negotiate everything, isn't it, Andrew?
We have a very contractual friendship. I appreciate the following things you've done.
Our mutual love is all very businesslike.
Thank heavens for that as well. We've got a great guest this episode.
Yeah, really exciting.
I think our first Broadway star on the podcast.
Such a list of credits
Yeah.
Across the pond. Really,
Absolutely.
really inspiring, yeah.
We're talking about Telly Leung. He's been Aladdin. He was Bok in Wicked. He's been in Godspell. He's been in any number of amazing things.
Beautiful flower drum song back in the day with Lea Salonga.
And indeed in George Takei's Allegiance, which I will be talking to him quite a lot about in this episode.
And it was so lovely to have Joy on the programme too.
Absolutely. Showstopper Joy Tan, a recent convert, a recent conscript to the Showstopper way. And amazingly, Joy is also in Allegiance with Telly Leung at the moment. So,
Absolutely. And they were so impassioned to be together, weren't they? Just such a lovely dynamic between the two of them. You can see there's that camaraderie, having been in the cast for a number of weeks together now.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny, isn't it? Being in a cast with someone, it's like you very quickly sort of become family, good or ill, whether you very quickly hate each other or very quickly love each other in the way families do. Being in a show together just really fast forwards your relationship, I always think.
It really does. And I really particularly feel that with Showstopper because unlike other acting gigs, Showstopper works in a slightly different way, and that we're sort of in a rolling contract with people sort of coming and going around the other work that they do. And when someone's away, for example, Joshua Jackson has been away for a while with the brilliant Girl from the North Country tour. I miss his energy in shows, and I feel the same when Lucy was in her play, etc. You know, you do really miss those energies.
Well, we recorded this episode at Tall Story Studios back in just March. Not very long ago, in fact. Duncan Walsh Atkins was at the keys. Let's have a listen.
Let's do that.
It's Telly Leung. Welcome.
Hi, how are you all?
Hey, good, Telly. How are you doing?
I'm thrilled to be here.
We are absolutely thrilled to have you. You are currently appearing in the West End of the Charing Cross Theatre in the production of George Takei's Allegiance, along with, also in the room, Showstopper Joy Tan.
Hi, I'm Showstopper Joy Tan.
Yes, Joy.
Telly, you're across in the UK. Is this the first time you've performed over here in the UK?
That's my first time doing an actual show 8 times a week here in the UK. I've done concerts here. I performed at the Hippodrome before Magic Mike was there, you know, before all the male burlesque took over. I've also done concerts at the Zedell, at Crazy Cops, but I've vacationed here a ton. I'm totally that Showmosexual that's been here and in 5 days seen 8 shows, and I'll go jet lagged and just, pound espressos to make sure I stay awake for the matinee and then see an evening show. I mean, I am that theater queen that will come fly on the red eye from New York, get here and see 2 shows.
Okay, but what is your favorite show you've seen here?
You know what? This particular trip, I think my favorite show that I saw here was a play called The Doctor. Juliet Stevenson, is that right?
Yeah.
Incredible, tour de force, unbelievable, amazing. And I hope that has a life beyond that. But, I also got to see my very first panto.
How was that?
Oh, wow.
It was awesome. I saw both. I saw the Palladium panto and I saw the Ian McKellen panto as well. And first of all, in shock at how absolutely dirty and filthy it is. Yeah. I was sitting next to a child and I was watching her watch the show going, is she registering all of these pretty dirty jokes?
Yeah, it's like a British version of Family Guy, right? It's the sweet spot between adult and kid humour, yeah.
And then of course, Granny sitting next to the kid is but it's great. It's great. I loved it.
And were you familiar with the concept of panto? If you haven't grown up in the UK, panto can be quite a sort of cultural impact. What on earth is this medium I'm watching right now?
I had heard the legend of the panto, but I have not but I do think you must be in the audience to experience it for yourself as you call and respond to what's happening on stage. All of that, that whole experience of it is you have to be there. You can have friends tell you about it, but just y'all come to London and go see a panto.
That's great.
Awesome. And we should talk about your show. So Joy and Telly, you're both appearing in George Takei's Allegiance. Telly, you're in the original production and the Broadway transfer. Can you tell us, what is George Takei's Allegiance?
Yeah, George Takei's Allegiance is an original musical that is inspired by the life of our star, George Takei. Many people know George because he was the original Sulu in Star Trek and sort of a pioneering actor for the Asian community. But also what many people don't know about him is that he and his family were part of the 120,000 people that were forced to leave their homes in the west coast of America and move into internment camps after the bombing of Pearl Harbor simply because they were Japanese. And it was a sort of a horrific, dark chapter in American history, something that we are not proud that we did to our own citizens. But also a story, because we're not proud of it, not many people talked about it and not many people know about it. So it's really become George's mission to have that story be told to as many people as possible so that we learn from those mistakes from the past and not do that again.
And Telly, can you tell us about your role within the show? How does that relate to George?
Yeah, so first of all, I've worked on the show for a really long time. For our musical theater fans who are listeners, you'll know musicals take a really long time to get anywhere. And so my very first reading of the show was in 2010.
Oh, wow.
So this is my 13th year of working on Allegiance.
That's
wow,
amazing.
that's about as long as Showstopper's been running. There we go.
Wow.
Wild, right? And I remembered, at the time, I had a couple of friends who were working on the show. Leia Salonga was like, I'm doing this show with George Takei. How cool is that? Who knows if it's ever going to be on Broadway? It's about the Japanese American internment. That's the last thing you think would be a topic for a big Broadway musical. But we're like, but it's really, really special. And you should really get involved in it. She had done readings of it in Los Angeles before 2010. And then the first New York reading I did. In the show, I play Mini George. I play young him, so George and I share a role. But when we go back in time into the 1940s, George plays another role. He plays my grandfather, Oji-chan, which is the Japanese word for grandpa.
He is equally incredible as both, just for the record. It's so funny to watch him transform every night into bumbly fun Japanese grandpa. And then right back at the end, you see him again as this hard-worn, really cynical, man who literally went through war. It's really that the gravitas of him and of his ability to convey emotion, there wasn't a rehearsal where we weren't crying in the room, to be honest. Just us who'd seen the show all the time.
I still get emotional. 13 years later, whenever George does that last scene in the show, and I don't want to spoil it for people, but there's one moment at the very end of the show that leaves me still in tears 13 years later. And for sure, when we see audience members at curtain call and the lights go up a little bit, people are wiping the tears away as they're clapping and,
So my favorite thing to do in the show, besides this one scene where we can completely improvise, the dino one, is actually right at the end, the ensemble is allowed to turn out to the audience and address them directly. And in my peripheral vision, I like counting every time I can see someone raise their hand to their eyes because they're crying and wiping away their tears. I've gotten up to a max of 8, but a lot of people like to do it when the lights are down because then no one sees that they were crying.
So Joy, how do you figure into this? What's your role in the show?
Okay, so on the surface of it, I would say that I am the 16 to 17 and a half-ish daughter of one of the families who gets their home taken away from them. I think on a textual level of how I serve the narrative, I have decided that I am the closest thing to the childlike perspective that can be seen in the show, because the real story that has inspired this is George. Obviously, he was in concentration camps at 5, and we don't have a 5-year-old, and I'm glad we don't, because there are a lot of child labor laws in the UK that we'd have to be really strict about. But I'm the youngest looking person in the show, so I think finding that innocence every night, or really bringing the world of someone going through adolescence and puberty into the show, and what Peggy, that's my character's name, Peggy, what she's concerned with on a nightly basis, what her main priorities are, because she's a teenager. And I think as a teenager, I feel like I had like a really good grasp on like the big topics of like being sad and like world's bad things. But also I was really obsessed with who I had a crush on and like who liked me and who didn't like me. And I think that's fun to be able to bring to the show every night. It makes it fun for me at least. So
that's the balance of being that age, right? All the big things and all the small poignant things that are so personal.
Exactly, because you can feel all the big things, and because you feel so, I feel like I was feeling really deeply as a teenager. Like you feel all of these things all at the same time. And you're old enough to understand what it means that the global climate crisis is happening. You're old enough to understand that like we should be striking every Friday for our teachers. But you're also old enough to feel like your crush saying this specific thing to you is the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
like it is, to be honest, it is. Like that's not to like minimize or patronize what like teenagers and adolescents go through. Like that is such an important thing. Who likes you and who doesn't?
It sounds like an incredible show to be part of. What's the music like? Can you tell us a bit about what it feels like to sing the show?
Yeah, the music is incredible. Our composer Jay Kuo sort of, it's a Japanese American show. So of course, just like Japanese American people, I'm Chinese American, but like just like kids that are part of that immigrant experience, like it's this amalgamation of and like weird mutant of like two different cultures that come together. So in our show, of course, you'll hear sounds that feel very Japanese and traditionally Japanese, because I think probably a lot of these families, especially the Issei, that first generation of people coming to the United States as immigrants, would bring that with them. And then their kids are the second generation, the Nisei, or maybe even the third generation, Sansei. They have American culture in them. So you're going to hear a lot of sounds that feel very Japanese, but you're also going to hear very Western big band, Benny Goodman sounds as well, because that's 1940s, and maybe even a little bit of like the beginnings of like rock. Do you know what I mean? The 50 sounds. So like, I think it's a really, and of course it's also musical theater, right? So, and because, it was me and Lea Salonga, like who sort of originated those roles, like you're going to hear the style of singing much more in the style of Les Mis or Miss Saigon, because we were there.
Yeah.
It was us. It was sort of built, the songs were sort of built on us, and that's our forte,
And in the decade and a half that you've been working on the project, how's it developed and changed?
First of all, the other part that your listeners may or may not know about is that with a new musical, things change a lot. So I remembered when I first started, my character Sammy had one song in the show, and I was a very secondary character. The character that Lea Salonga originated, Kay, was not named Kay. It was named Gloria, and she was not my sister. She was my Japanese tutor. And she was married to or engaged to my brother. I had a brother in the show. I also had a mother in the show. Those two characters have gotten excised and cut out of the show.
Wow.
So much has changed. There's a character in our show that's based on somebody historical named Mike Masaoka. Masaoka used to be a singing, dancing, like hat and cane role that was originated by Paulo Montalban when we did it out of town. Paulo, for all your listeners, is the very dashing Asian prince to Brandy's Cinderella on that very Whitney Houston Cinderella.
God.
Impossible. Yeah. So like that was him. And then as the show morphed, that became much more of a speaking role, and that was cast with a lot of actors that have more background in text and Shakespeare and no singing for that role. So it's changed a lot, actually. And so much of that is because we learned from our audience what they were responding to. It's also a show that delves into a heavy subject matter, and B, politics. And I think the first couple of drafts of the show, our writers were very open about how they felt politically. They picked a side, and about how they felt about, who was right and who was wrong. And actually, as you sort of look at history and as you get older, you sort of go, oh, right, like there's much more nuance to this. And that, and so I think that they brought more of that into the show. I also felt like what we started with was a very heavy show when we first started developing the show. And actually, the more we learned about what this community endured during this time, they actually found a lot of joy and happiness, even though they were forced to leave their homes and they were in these isolating, desolate places in the middle of America that were barren deserts. Do you know what I mean? They were able to find joy. They were were able to find love. There were people that got engaged and married in those places. They did organize things like baseball games and camp dances, which we show in our show, because they had to survive somehow. So sort of the resilience of that community by finding joy and happiness. So our show is filled with up-tempo songs, even though you don't think of that when you think of Japanese American internment. It's funny. It is like there are laughs. There is a love story. Like there's several love stories, in fact, and I think that's true to the experience. That's authentic.
It's one of the big themes of the show, isn't it? This concept of gaman.
Well, gaman, there's actually no direct English translation for the word. Endure with dignity and pride, I guess, is the definition that's sort of used in our show. It's a very Japanese concept.
I found out it's a very Japanese American concept.
Oh, interesting.
Because, and I've had this talk backstage. Funnily enough, the word gaman moved to America with the Japanese who immigrated there, and it actually changed in meaning. So there are some people who speak Japanese in our cast who, when they first came in, they were a little bit confused, because in Japan, gaman means something quite different from America. In America, I feel like the non-translatable concept is to hold on and soldier through and like carry that dignity with you through the adversity. In Japan, it's kind of, as far as I've been told by some of my Japanese friends, gaman is a bit more, hey, just get on with it. Like, oh, you're being too loud. Stop moving. Like, it's the sort of thing that a mother uses to admonish her children.
Wow.
Which I think is also really interesting, because it brings that concept on into the immigrant perspective and the immigrant narrative.
It's interesting I did not know that it's sort of like, it started off probably from Japanese culture as meaning something different. But it's interesting, that word was brought up again when all the tsunami, we were working on the show when all the tsunamis and the earthquakes hit Japan, and that word was brought up again. And so in some ways, like that, this word keeps actually morphing and evolving, is that even that idea of gaman, like, was brought up again even more recently, to me, to sort of maybe even carry on, even though that event happened in Japan, it carried a more Japanese American definition because of what happened to that community. So this word keeps like evolving and changing, which is
I think
cool.
The evolution of words and like the etymology of words and how they can mean something different, like that's something really special to me, because obviously I'm non-binary and I use they them pronouns. Hello, listeners. The evolution of, for example, singular they being used in T.S. Eliot's phrasing, or the evolution of how the word you in Old English has moved on into what we use today. Like, that's all the sort of stuff I read at 2 a.m. So, God, love etymology. Yeah, love evolution.
I love that your YouTube spirals etymology, because mine is usually just divas belting Define Gravity late at night.
Have you seen that one video of that Legally Blonde clip, which is this, what you want, Warner, what you want is me? Have you seen that?
I have not seen that one, but I have seen Courtney, Take Your Break. Please tell me you've seen that one. All of the Courtney, Take Your Break.
The mega mix.
The mega mix.
I love that.
So great. And talking of those sort of fluffier musicals, if we can put it like that, Telly, you've played Aladdin.
Yes.
Which must have been a treat.
Yeah, Aladdin was a blast to do, actually. First of all, that theater on Broadway is my favorite theater that I've worked in. I've done 7 Broadway shows, and that is my absolute favorite house. The New Amsterdam was the home of the Ziegfeld Follies. So, the ghosts of all those Follies performers are there, and you feel that every night you're on stage. And doing a sort of a classic old-fashioned musical like Aladdin, where, there's boy meets girl, tap dancing and a giant orchestra pit, and the curtain goes up and down. You know what I mean? It's for so many, and also for so many people, it's their first Broadway show. It was really exciting to be a part of, that person's experience. I always thought about that. I always thought about, like, what little kid is seeing their first Broadway show today?
Yeah.
At Aladdin, and this is gonna, like, change their life.
Oh, that's so magical.
And and I try to remind myself of that on a Sunday after a 5-show weekend when you're exhausted and everything hurts, and you go, you know what? It's for that 8-year-old, and they better appreciate this show. You know what I mean? But yeah, I always think about that little kid who's probably never seen a Broadway show, and this is their first one.
At Frozen in the West End at the moment, they do a special intro. Turn off your phones, and for anyone who's seeing their first West End show today, a lifetime of magic. It's like a really beautiful little speech. And Astrid was she was like, that's me. So delighted, amongst a sea of other 5-year-old girls dressed in Elsa costumes.
Oh, how gorgeous.
Wow.
But it's so memorable, your first time at the theatre. I wonder if you remember yours, Joy?
I don't remember my first one, but I do remember the first one that I saw after coming to London to study, and it was Miss Saigon, and I remember looking at it for the first 15 minutes of that show and thinking, oh God, is this, like, not knowing if I get a work visa, just thinking, God, like, will I have to do this for my life? Which, tying into us and why we're here today, like, I also think there's something, I mean, you obviously know this, Telly, but I think there's something so important and so magical about the fact that you can be seen as a lead, as an attractive lead, and as an attractive Asian lead who is nuanced, who is desired, who is flexible, who is really talented. Like, that really gets my motors happy.
Oh, thanks, Joy. I'll pay you later.
Thank you. £50 now, up from the 30. Thanks. But yeah, it's just so beautiful to see us be different from what. Be outside of what we thought we could see on stage.
Yeah, well, I think when we were making Allegiance, that was very important to us. For example, Joy plays Peggy in the show. It was very important to us to not have it be like, this is ensemble person number 4. Like we did not want that, because we wanted to make sure each ensemble member knew exactly who they were, because they probably represented somebody who lived this experience and lived this emotional journey in real life. This actually happened to 120,000 people in America. So we wanted to honor those people by honoring the actors and the performers that were in those ensemble tracks with names, with relationships with each other, with histories. And I think that is important, and hopefully a nice change as we move forward, as we start creating shows from here on out.
The audience can also totally see that. Like, it's partly because of the staging of it. It's a very intimate staging. It's very much like I can see the person in the back row and he can definitely see me trying not to laugh at the wrong bit. But like, I go outside and I try to be really, really invisible, and usually I'm really good at that. And on this show, people keep finding me, someone with maybe 4 lines, and they go, "You were incredible. Well done." And that's it's special to me. This show has been so special to me.
Joy, I've had friends say that to me. They go, "Who is that performer with the red pigtails? Who is that? I cannot take my eyes off that performer." And I said, yeah, incredible. Joy's incredible.
It's because the red pigtails are actually crocheted by, it was actually crocheted ribbons by one of our other cast members, Rachel.
Oh, yeah.
She's got her own crochet shop as well.
Amazing. Shout out. And Telly, have you noticed a difference in the audience response over here in the West End versus on Broadway? Bearing in mind that the story of Japanese internment is one that I know it's not known enough in the US, over here probably even more so.
It is a totally different reception here. When we opened the show in San Diego in 2012, we opened in a community that first of all experienced that. We were in California.
Oh, wow,
and
yeah.
so many of our audience members were Japanese Americans that were probably 3rd generation, 4th generation, that had family that experienced this. So there was a personal connection to it. So we did very well. We sold a lot of tickets and broke box office records. I think we still hold the record today at the Old Globe for being the highest selling show. And it's because it was something that was very personal to that California community. Then we opened on Broadway in 2015. To me, the show was better. The show had morphed and had changed, but a different climate, and we also opened against the juggernaut of Hamilton that year. So
oh man, there goes any awards.
Well, we had to also keep that in mind too, that season, of all the shows that opened, there were other great shows that Shuffle Along also opened that season. And the only shows that really survived were School of Rock and Waitress. And Hamilton, and really Hamilton, and of course Hamilton deserves all of that attention and all of the accolades, of course, but it also created a vacuum for any other show that was going to be receiving any sort of attention. So just maybe not the best timing on our part, but also, different. I think the attitude of Americans at the time, I remembered it was on December 7th that we recorded our cast recording. It was also on that day that it is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor that day, which sort of is the event that spurned the whole Japanese American internment. It was also on that day when we were in the studio that my phone started to blow up, saying that Donald Trump, not only did he announce that he was running for president, but that he was going to propose a ban on all Muslims coming into the country. And I said, isn't it crazy that we are we're recording a show about the Japanese American internment in the studio right now, and my Twitter is blowing up with this news about Donald Trump. But you know what? Guess this was December, so we said, he's not going to win. Hillary's going to win, right? That was really the attitude. So a show like Allegiance didn't feel as sort of like necessary, I think, at the time. Even though it did touch people and move people, we were all like, nah, that'll never happen again, right? And now, frankly, after 4 years of Donald Trump and after COVID, after everything that we've experienced, after Black Lives Matter, after George Floyd, after all of the hate crimes that Asian people have experienced around the world because of COVID, the show feels different now in 2023. It just does. 7 years later, I think we are better artists, we are better storytellers, and the audience, they're better listeners for it. So the audience is smarter. We're all smarter. We're all more empathetic and compassionate people after everything we've gone through in the last 7 years, right? So the show is, even though we have not changed a word of the show is different because we're different.
This is a complete pivot here, but I am dying to know about your improv musical background.
Oh gosh, okay, so.
And we should say, Telly, before we started recording, you said you dabbled.
I dabbled. So here's the thing. I've always been fascinated by improv, and I've always been fascinated by improv musicals. I've a very dear friend in New York. Her name is J. Elaine Marcos. You would know her because she's been on Broadway a ton. Chorus Line. My first Broadway show was with her. We did Flower Drum Song together. She was in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. She was in the Annie revival on Broadway, playing Lily, which was also such a coup for Asian actors because here she was, an Asian actress playing Lily, right? Lily St. Regis, because she's hysterically funny. She said, I want to do musical improv. She's like, but I want to do it. She's like, there's so many musical improv groups in New York that are very good improv comedians, but not great singers. I was like, what if we got great skilled musical theater singers that sort of like learn the improv? So we formed a small group, never went anywhere. We literally played the downstairs of like bars, and like we did little improv shows here and there where we had to like invite friends to come or pay to be part of them, right? But we called ourselves 8 Bar Cut.
Oh, that's a great name.
And we would get a suggestion from the audience. You know, we'd have this comedy bars downstairs. So like somebody would be waving a light at us when it was 5 minutes to end the set. You know, we'd have a improv pianist, and we for a little while we took ourselves to class. So we said we're good singers. We know musical form. What we don't know is like improv skills. So we actually brought an improv person to come and help us sort of with the improv part of it. And so, but that was almost a decade ago. So, I mean, I dabbled in it almost a decade ago, and I am slightly pooping my pants. I might have to do it again.
The clock is ticking.
Oh God, nervous.
So
stress.
In Showstopper Telly, we homage certain genres of musicals. What are your favourite musicals?
Oh gosh, I have a really soft spot for the big British import musicals that I think of when I think, like, because I grew up an 80s and 90s kid. So like I grew up on Phantom. I grew up on Saigon and Les Mis. I mean, those are my shows, you know? And so I mean, I have a really soft spot for that. My first Broadway show that I ever saw was Cats at the Winter Garden Theater. And that is a magical show. I had no idea what was happening, you know.
And then once you'd seen it, you still had no idea what was happening.
But I do remember I saw Ken Page, who was the original Old Deuteronomy on Broadway. I do remember that he sits on stage in the junkyard so that the kids can come up to him with their playbills, and he autographs playbills at intermission and he autographs it Old Dude. And I think somewhere I still have that playbill.
Oh, wow.
And I also remember the late great Laurie Beachman played Grisabella. I went on a student matinee, so like we sat in the last row of the Winter Garden because it was like $15 or something. You know, I went with a school group, but I remember this woman's voice literally cutting through my body because it was so powerful, her singing memory. And of course, and then you learn about her sort of history. You know, she's the original narrator in Joseph on Broadway, but also that she's sadly no longer with us because she passed from ovarian cancer. But she had one of the most remarkable voices ever. And she sang like every day was her last. You know, I did not know this at the time, but like Cats was one of those shows that she went back to and was sort of easy enough for her to do. She had one song, and while she was still recovering and getting treatment and chemo and radiation, all that, and it was one of those things that she would always pop back in. Fantine was the other one. She would always pop in and do Fantine once in a while because it was something that wasn't so crazy hard on her body as she was going through all that treatment. So that's something I would learn later on as an adult about her. But I just remember, I was like, who is this woman with this incredible voice singing Memory? And I remember I was like, I knew the show was mic'd, but it was one of those experiences where I sat in the last row of the Winter Garden and I could feel her voice resonating on my body. And I was like, I want to sing. Like, that really was
what an
one of those
inspiring
moments.
story. That's so amazing that you felt connected with her in that way.
You mentioned the New Amsterdam. You've also performed at my old alma mater a few times, Circle in the Square.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I was at Circle in the Square Theatre School 2005, 2006. It's quite a place.
I love that theater. I love it. I've done 2 shows there. The first time I worked there was in the 2011 revival of Godspell.
Yeah.
Which was so great, which actually had a lot of improv in it. Most of the show is built on improv from the company that's in it. So Godspell is unique in that way in that there's no real libretto. The book is the Bible.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's the book of Matthew. And the songs are, the Stephen Schwartz songs. And it's that order of like the parables and the songs, but like what you do with them should be up to whatever cast gets their hands on that show.
Yeah.
Right. And when we did the revival, that's exactly what we did. So, we had a lot of people in our cast that were musicians, muso actors. So we played a lot for ourselves. But most of that show was built on us improving in the room.
Did you play in the round?
We did it in the round, yes.
It must be so much fun to play that show in that space.
Yeah, I love working in the round. At first you're sort of like, oh, these people can't see me and my back is to these people. And then somewhere in the process you go, you know what, my back is always going to be to somebody. So I just have to be and be present and, they'll see me when I turn around,
Yeah. And of course, Allegiance is played Traverse.
Traverse, like if you think of it as like a runway, audience on 2 sides and it's like space in the middle and you're basically like on a fashion runway, right?
I love the little glint in your eye right now, Telly, because I'm imagining you like watching those Elphaba belt out things at 1 o'clock in the morning and just wanting to bust that out halfway through Traverse Allegiance.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, totally. Yeah, it's either that or RuPaul's Drag Race. So between the runways and the Elphabas and the Showmosexual, like that is... I have to give a shout out to our director, Tara Overfield Wilkinson, who did a phenomenal job of staging the show. And what I love about Tara is, first of all, Tara is a West End vet. Right. She's been in a bazillion shows, then worked her way up to dance captain, eventually associate choreographer, and now is really a director in her own right. And but what she does so well, because she's worked her way up over 3 decades of being on the West End, is she is a phenomenal problem solver. So did she go, I want to do the show in Traverse? Well, no, the Charing Cross is in Traverse. And yet she figured out a way to make our show as clear and as impactful in that Traverse as possible, which I think is so smart. So it's I think it's just... I can't say enough wonderful things about Tara.
Yeah, there's so much in the show that makes you feel like held and supported by the team. Tara was so easy to talk to because she's been an actor for so long and such a brilliant performer for so long. That she and Kirsty, the other director on the show, they have both are such phenomenal performers in their own right, really give us that feeling of being held.
You know what makes them great directors is that they are not afraid to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Frankly, that to me is the biggest strength of a director when they don't pretend to know what it is, but they are not afraid to go, you know what, I actually don't know. So this part I don't know, let's bring in a Japanese consultant and figure that out. Let's bring in a language consultant and figure that out. Let's ask somebody who does know, let's ask the 85-year-old person in the room who the show is named after, who lived the experience, what that was like. So I think that is part of that feeling of being held, Joy, is that leader in the room is unafraid to go, I don't know either, but we'll figure it out together. It'll be all right. We'll figure it out.
Tangent there. How amazing as well that George, as you say, is at 84 years old.
Oh my God, yes.
Thousands of miles from home doing 7 shows a week. What an extraordinary character. 8 shows a week.
85, 8 shows a week. And I've done the show with him for 13 years and he's never missed a show.
Oh, Has he not?
Wow.
That's very exciting.
He is the Ethel Merman.
And also, not to mention, just that George Takei doesn't miss a show, but he gets up at 7 a.m., does Good Morning Britain or whatever that's called, and then comes in, does the show, and then if he can do it, he signs the posters because he knows people were coming to see it.
I was lucky enough to see the show on press night, and you could tell in the curtain call just how much the show means to him. It was just a delight to see him beaming from ear to ear. And I know he's spoken in interviews very movingly about how this is, in some ways, his legacy project and how keen he is to spread this story.
But also, 85-year-old George Takei has had an amazing career and never played London. So he's done pantos. He's done pantos in the UK.
Kingdom,
But he's never played London proper. So every night he takes that curtain call, he is beaming because he's like, I'm in London. Here I am. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm living the dream, and there are more still. You know what I mean? That's incredible to me.
A1 George Takei
Telly,
impression,
could you just give us an oh my for the room, please?
Oh my! I know he's heard my impression many times. When you work with a man for 13 years in a musical, everybody has a good George Takei impression.
I'm supposed to have one by the end of the run.
You will.
Oh my! I can't do it. I mean, I can. I will.
Do you have any other impressions in the bag?
Okay, the Showmosexual that I am. I'm going to confess something to you all now, which is that one of my other favorite things is Forbidden Broadway.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And still mad that there's never been an Asian person cast in Forbidden Broadway because I'm sort of determined. If George Takei can make his London debut at 85, I am determined to make my Forbidden Broadway debut at some point because I love doing impressions of other people doing impressions of all those musical theater people that I like. So the fact that when you watch somebody like Christine Petty do their Bernadette Peters impression and it's amazing. Or like somebody do a Carol Channing impression. I think it's wonderful. Many people say my Carol Channing is just George Takei, but without more teeth.
So layered, Telly.
I know. So what show queen doesn't have a Pat LaPone impression? They just don't Ethel Merman. Merman, for sure. There's no business I'm a geek. I just musical theater geeked out for all of it.
Well, I think on that note, let's drive into the next gear of musical theater geekery. Would you like Telly to make up a song with us?
Yes.
What about maybe runway modeling?
Runway modeling.
Looking flash, looking fly. Watch me as I roll by.
Looking hot, looking sweet. Hey, that's a hot guy.
Looking good, looking swell. Looking out, looking to tell. On the runway, every night we take flight.
We're gonna stomp the runway. Stomp the runway.
We're gonna stomp the runway. We're gonna stomp the runway.
Looking chic.
Looking flash. Looking hella fine.
Looking sexy.
Looking hot, mama. Looking so divine.
We're gonna
stomp the runway.
Fashion.
Stomp the runway. Style. Stomp the runway.
Work.
Stomp the runway.
That was Telly.
Oh, wasn't Telly brilliant at improvising?
Yeah. One of those guests who comes along and says, I'm really nervous about this. I'm really scared. I'm going to be terrible. And then just effortlessly unleashes his musical theater amazingness and is brilliant.
Knocked it out of the park. And I suppose those 10 years ago when Telly was doing improv musicals in New York, it's all still there. It's like riding a bike.
Absolutely. And I often think people who are musical theater performers, sometimes they just have this stuff in their bones. They don't need to learn it intellectually often. It's there. You know how songs work. Just sing a song.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. When we're doing our Showstopper Pro courses, obviously we do a lot of different types of courses, different shapes and different people from all over the world. And when we're doing Showstopper Pro, it's an amazing thing to see these professional musical theatre actors come into the room. And like you say, they might be quite nervous, but by the end of the 2 days, my goodness, they are making up some beautiful art.
Whenever I teach with Jordan always cries at least 3 times a class.
Yeah.
Because he's just so moved.
Jordan doesn't have blood in his veins. It's pure MT.
That's fair. That's a good way of putting it.
And it's a beautiful thing to behold. It really is.
What do you have in your veins instead of blood?
Cheese.
Cheese. Yeah.
Yeah. squeaky American cheese, which is from my Disney World days as a child.
It's great.
So there we are.
I love it as well. You didn't miss a beat there. You knew what your answer was.
Yeah.
I didn't know. If you'd asked me, I would have gone, I don't know. That's the sort of question I hate answering. But you'd got it just ready to draw in case anyone ever asks.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. So, Andrew, what's in your veins?
No, I just said I hate answering those kind of questions. I have no idea. I really hate it when people go like, what would you do if, or would you do if or if, all those kind of things. I'm always like, I don't know.
Would you? Oh, you don't like would you rather?
No, not really.
Okay.
Like, well, I don't know. It depends.
Okay, well, all right.
There's a lot of context we have to sort out first.
Sure. Oh, well, I was just going to go into playing it with you then, but you literally just said that's not what you like. So maybe there's a clause in our business friendship contract that at the end says, play Would You Rather with Andrew Pugsley. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I have to, if it's required for our business relationship, then I'll do it, Ali. I'm just saying, it's not my cup of tea.
So what would you rather? Would you rather wait another month for the podcast or not? Depends how long you've got to edit it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. If it's released on the 1st, it tends to be edited on the 31st of the previous month. But let's say what you're listening to right now has been edited in good time with care and attention.
You're multi-talented, Andrew.
Oh, so are you. All right. If you enjoy listening to us, listen again next month. Subscribe. Tell a friend about our podcast.
Yes, please do. And tell a friend about our shows. In fact, buy a ticket for a friend to come to those shows.
Showstopperthemusical.com on all the usual social channels.
Hurrah. Yes. TikTok, YouTube, Twitter.
Insta, Facebook. All them. Still not on Mastodon.
Mastodon just sounds like such a prehistoric social media form. Just imagining loads of cave people. Handle. What's your handle? Rock. What is your handle?
Stone.
Okay.
See you next month.
We love you. Bye.